If you are familiar with other action shonen narratives within the Weekly Shonen Jump or other shonen magazines, there is a vague general trend of supernatural abilities being contained in some form within objects for people to utilize even if they don't have supernatural abilities themselves. You could assume this commonly takes the form of something like cursed tools in Jujutsu Kaisen, where, when the plot demands it, sometimes weapons can contain cursed techniques from the person who last used them, or the weapons can generally be able to attack with cursed energy, making them more effective than standard weaponry. Within Undead Unluck's power system, the way in which the narrative justifies objects having supernatural abilities in some form are to classify them under the idea of artifacts. First things first, and not to go into it too much, here are the basic things you do need to know about Undead Unluck's narrative universe. There is this book called Apocalypse, which gives quests to humans, and every 3 months, if all of those quests aren't completed, a new rule to the universe is added. If 100 rules to the universe are added, Ragnarok is triggered, and the universe is destroyed and then reset, only to go through all of that again. Negators are people who, through some rule of the universe, randomly come to possess the ability to cancel out or reverse the effects of one rule of the universe at some point in their life. Umas are monsters created by the introduction of a new rule to the universe by God, and are sort of meant to be in direct opposition to negators as standing up to the will of God through Apocalypse and his quests. Like, after 3 months, if none of Apocalypse's quests are completed, he will add a new rule to the universe anyways, but by nature of the negators being able to prevent new rules being added to the universe if they complete all the quests, essentially means that they are being pitted against the Umas in a race to prevent them from existing. In between negators and Umas are artifacts, which neither directly benefit Umas nor directly benefit negators. Artifacts are simply objects containing some sort of supernatural ability that isn't connected to a person that is born with a negator ability, and are generally the only thing to stay consistent in their appearance between iterations of the universe. Artifacts provide a really unique narrative opportunity for characters who either cannot use their negator ability offensively in some form, or characters who simply need some extra power boost to be more effective in combat. While the ceiling of power within Undead Unluck's power system isn't necessarily defined by nature of how both negators and Umas are constantly raising the bar of their abilities based off of individual interpretation, artifacts provide a very interesting sort of power system floor in which everything else is able to be scaled around because they are so consistent and static in their purpose. While a negator might be able to get a wider use out of their ability in one loop versus another because of their different life experience, artifacts are very much used about the same between every loop, or if they're not used the same, then the fundamental abilities they do offer to the user are about the same. You know, they don't grow and evolve or are up to interpretation like negator abilities and the ability sets of Umas are. There is Apocalypse, which is consistently the first artifact found at the start of every loop, and is integral not just to the functions of Umas being created / laws being introduced to the world, but negators having an opportunity to stand up against God. There are artifacts within Undead Unluck's narrative that are references to Journey to the West, which I really like, but my favorite original artifact to Undead Unluck is a set of prosthetic legs called Blade Runner. Do you know Sukuna's ability in Jujutsu Kaisen? The ability to create a line and then cleave through anything along that line? Well, Blade Runner, in exchange for cutting off your legs and replacing your legs with the artifact Blade Runner, can allow you to create slashes like that at will just by kicking. Fucking awesome, am I right? There is Life is Strange, which is a pocket watch that enables you to either age someone up or reverse the time of their body, except doing so to someone else will inflict the effects that you put onto someone else, but onto you, and 10 times as much. So if you age someone up by 10 years, you will be aged 100 years in return. There is the Kinton Cloud, which is a direct reference to the cloud that only lets people with a pure soul ride it from Journey to the West. And finally, my favorite example of an artifact within Undead Unluck that isn't Apocalypse is a supernatural fountain pen known as the G-Liner. There are two things well known with the G-Liner. One thing that isn't exclusive to the function of that specific artifact, and one thing that is. The G-Liner is the only artifact within Undead Unluck which allows somebody to draw something and manifest whatever they've drawn into existence as if it always existed, though they can only manifest one thing at a time with the G-Liner. The thing not exclusive to the G-Liner, but most commonly associated with it, is the memories that are embedded within it. Any artifact can, in theory, have memories placed within it, memories that a person will see as soon as they grab said artifact, but the G-Liner is unique in allowing someone a perspective on everything that will happen in a loop and has already happened. The G-Liner is also the only artifact we know of to date in which somebody interacting with it for the first time in a loop will result in them becoming a negator. Akira Kuno, a child who came to possess the G-Liner in the 100th loop of Undead Unluck, was cursed with becoming the negator unknown, unable to speak to or make their presence known to anybody in the world at large, because the knowledge they possessed about what had already happened and what was going to happen was too dangerous to the cycle of death and destruction that God perpetuates. I don't have too much more to say about artifacts within Undead Unluck. I do think other battle shonens present the idea of supernatural abilities within objects a lot more interestingly. That said, I cannot deny that the way artifacts are so much more immediately prevalent to Undead Unluck's narrative is just incredibly interesting to me personally. I really like the way that the artifacts kind of function like a monkey's paw, very similar to negator abilities. Like when somebody becomes a negator for the first time, there is generally a tragedy associated with their inability to prevent the ability from being used when they first learn that they can use it. While there is no upfront fee or downside to some artifacts, other artifacts are like, oh, you need to cut your legs off to get access to this ability. Oh, do you want to age somebody 10 years? Well, you're going to be aged 100 years in exchange. Oh, do you want to use this pen that can make anything you draw come to life? Well, nobody will know you'll draw anything in the future because you are now the negator of unknown and nobody knows you exist. It's just cool, you know? It both feels internally consistent yet also divergent enough from everything else we've seen. Like it is both a part of this broader power system we are familiar with, while also being like a side grade to it or something that runs parallel to it. Artifacts are definitely not the most interesting or fleshed out or thought out concepts within Undead Unluck's power system, but all the same, it's something that does really stand out to me and just made the experience of going through Undead Unluck's specific battle shonen narrative a hell of a lot more memorable and interesting than I thought it would be.